How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I got the Civic running long enough that I could drive it out onto the driveway, and we got it cleaned up for the first time in about 2 years, I think. And after all that, it still looks like a dirty old Honda. So plan for this video is to get the Civic ready for its first actual drive and street tuning. So today I actually had my tuner come out just to look over the car, adjust the idle a little bit so we could actually get this thing up to temp. So everything was actually running really good. We got it up to temp. We got the idle adjusted. Currently I don't have the wideband wired up to the ECU. So all it is wired up to the gauge. So we were able to monitor it that way. But it'll be a lot easier to tune once we have it hooked up to the ECU. So that's something I have to take care of. Also, while the car was running, since we got it up to temp, thermostat opened, and the system was pressurized, we ended up with a nasty coolant leak. So I'm gonna have to get back underneath the car again and find out where this leak is coming from. Chances are I forgot to tighten one of the hose clamps because we did have a previous leak on a different hose clamp that I had forgotten to tighten. So I think what I'm gonna do is get under the car and just double check every single hose clamp, make sure that we're tight there. So we had it idling long enough that I could test the battery to make sure the alternator was charging it, which it is, so we know that's working. We had no oil leaks, no fuel leaks. So I think it's just gonna be a matter of fixing that coolant leak, getting the wideband wired up, and then I think we're taking it on the street. So we're getting very close. All right guys, so looking under the car here, we got two main points of drippage, and I think I figured out where they're coming from. So where both hoses go from the heater core to the block, so this hose clamp up here is where it was leaking from before, the first time that we started the car, and so we've tightened that one up, and that one doesn't seem to be leaking. Now I see fluid coming from other areas. Alright guys, so as it turns out, I forgot to tighten all of the hose clamps. So luckily, either it was sheer luck or I was thinking when I installed them, and they are all accessible. So I got up there with a flathead screwdriver and an 8mm socket, and I was able to get, I think it was 4 hose clamps that were loose. So we're actually very lucky that we didn't lose all of our coolant. So got them all tight. They shouldn't leak anymore, hopefully. I did find what kind of looked like an oil leak as well. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Plus there was coolant all over the block, so it was really hard to tell where it was coming from. It was a very small amount, but I wiped the whole block down again. Everything's clean under there, so it's something that I'm gonna have to continue to monitor, and hopefully we can find where it's coming from. I hope it's something simple. It almost looked like it was coming from part of the valve cover, but again, it's really hard to tell because of all the coolant that was all over the block. So now that it's clean, we should be able to diagnose that, but it's not going to keep the thing from driving. It's a very small leak from what I could tell. So moving forward, we're going to drop the car back on the ground and we're going to wire up this wideband. Alright guys, so I got the interior ripped apart again so I could get access to these wires. So from what I can tell, this is the 0 to 5 volt signal wire that comes off of the gauge. This is what we'll need to run to the ECU. So this runs to pin number D14, I believe. So if we come over here, I have it unplugged already, and it will be this white red wire here. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'll probably cut this zip tie here so I can get a bit of length off of it. I'll end up cutting that wire, and then I'm just going to end up lengthening the white wire that I have down here. So I ended up finding some spare white red wire here. So then I'm just going to run this from the white wire to the white red wire on the ECU plug, and then we should be good to go. So this should be pretty simple. Just a little bit of soldering and we will be done. Alright guys, so I got my soldering iron heating up here. Got my joint made, so I know I usually get Tim to do all the wiring for me, but I actually enjoy wiring too. I got my shrink tube on here so we can do this properly, and then once this joint is made, we'll route this wire to the ECU, we'll solder that joint, and we're done. Alright guys, interior is all put back together, and as you can see I got my wire here running to the ECU, so as long as I cut and soldered the right wire we should be good to go. So theoretically we should be able to drive this thing on the street, but I don't have insurance yet, so I'm gonna run to town tomorrow. Sun's going down, everywhere's closed now, so I'm gonna run to town tomorrow, get some insurance, and maybe do a lap around town. But before I forget, I'm going to top off the coolant because we spilled a bunch all over the floor. I know tomorrow I'm gonna get anxious to get this thing out on the road, so I'll probably forget about it. So I'm gonna do that now, that way it's done.
The next day.
Alright guys, I got insurance on the car. I took it out for a quick drive. Now I'm not gonna consider this the first drive yet because I just did a very quick lap around the block just to see if the clutch and brakes were working. In doing so, pulling it back into the garage, we got more leaks. Now it's not nearly as bad as it was the first time we had the thing up to temp, but from the looks of it now, I got a little bit of coolant here, I got oil here, and I got oil here. So now I gotta do some more checking to see where this stuff's coming from. I have a bit of a hunch that this here is transmission oil. I think it might be the axle seal since I didn't replace those, and it's probably leaking now that the axles are spinning. But I'm gonna have to jack up the car, get underneath, and see where this stuff's coming from. So once again, that's a little bit of a setback before we can do the actual official first drive. But it's good that we're finding this stuff now. It would be really annoying to book a dyno day and have the car at the dyno to get some tuning done, and then we end up having to fix this stuff all day instead of actually dynoing it. So it's good that we're finding this now. It's gonna take a bit more work, but yeah, I'm gonna jack up the car, get underneath, and see what's going on here.
A few moments later.
All right guys, so I spent a bit of time under the car trying to find out where these leaks are coming from, and I think we got a lot of work ahead of us. So I think I was able to determine that this leak here is coming from this axle here, so I think it's just that axle seal. So what I'm gonna do is order both axle seals for each side, and we'll get those replaced. I should have done that in the first place, but it wasn't leaking before and I decided not to change them, so my mistake. We'll get those changed. As for the oil leak on this side, from what I can tell, it is coming from pretty high up. There is a lot of wetness on this back side of the block here. At first I thought it might be coming from the head because it is pretty wet right here, and it runs all the way down the timing cover. But when I run my finger along the valve cover up here, I can kind of feel some wetness there too. So it leads me to believe that it is probably coming from somewhere in the valve cover. So what I'm gonna end up having to do, take the valve cover off, I'm gonna take the timing cover off, then I can really see inside there, see what's all wet with oil, and then maybe then we can determine where it's actually coming from. From what I can tell though, it may just be the valve cover, which I did change that gasket, but maybe I did something wrong, I'm not sure, but we'll get that taken apart yet, see what's going on there. And this is the worst one. So this coolant leak that I have down here, from what I can tell, it's coming from pretty high up. It's not coming from any hoses, but I saw some residue on my wire down here, and when I run my finger underneath this coolant tube right here, yeah, I got some wetness right there. So if we come to the H22 that I have here, you can see this coolant pipe that runs from the thermostat housing to this side of the block. I believe it's coming from here. So I did change the O-ring in there, it is brand new, but maybe it's just not sealing properly. It's sealing fine right now, but it seems like when the system is pressurized and the thermostat opens, that's kind of when it starts leaking. So that's going to be a very involved repair because I'm going to have to remove all of this to access it, to drain all the coolant. So with that, we're gonna have a lot of work ahead of us. It's gonna be a while before we can actually take this thing out for a first drive. As it is right now, it's not leaking to the point where I can't drive it at all. I could just do a lap around town again, but It is very annoying making a mess everywhere. So I think we're just gonna start tearing into this thing, get these things fixed, and hopefully once that's done, we can go for the official first drive.
16 paranoia-filled days later.
Alright guys, update time. So we are currently a few weeks later now. I did take a little bit of a break from working on the car because honestly I was a little bit discouraged with all the leaks. But I have been doing some little stuff in the meantime here and there, but it's time to really start tearing into this thing, diagnose where the oil leak is coming from, but here's where we're at currently. So I've already gone ahead and replaced the axle seals, so that should fix the transmission leak. It's been about a week since I did that, and I have no drippage on the floor, so I'm gonna call that fixed, but I guess we won't really know until we start driving the car, get the transmission fluid sloshing around in there, and see if there's any other leaks. Fingers crossed that fixed it. As far as the coolant leak goes, what I ended up doing wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I disconnected all these lines down here, took the entire thermostat housing off, and then the O-ring still looked really good in there. So all I ended up doing is spreading some RTV on the inside mating surface of the O-ring and then the outside mating surface, and then I put it all back together. I filled it with coolant a few days ago and we got no leaks on the floor yet, so we won't know for sure until we start the car and get it up to temp. You probably noticed this monstrosity here. This is a very, very temporary exhaust extension that I put on here. So when we were tuning the car at idle and even when I drove it, the AFRs were completely out of whack. Our theory is that the sensor is just too close to the tip of the exhaust, and what it's doing is it's actually sucking in air, so it's actually showing that it's running a lot leaner than it actually is. So we keep adding fuel to it and it's not really changing anything, except it's making it run a lot richer and making it want to stall and flood itself. So by adding this extension, I'm hoping that we'll get a lot more accurate reading on the AFR gauge, and that'll help us with tuning. So all I really have left now is to diagnose this oil leak. So I think I'm going to start today. I'm going to take the valve cover off, get the timing cover off, and just see if I can find out where the oil is coming from. I may have waited too long and all that oil may have dripped down, so there won't be anything fresh in there anymore. So what I may end up having to do is leaving the timing cover off. We'll put the valve cover back on, and we'll just run it like that for a little while until we can see some fresh oil leak, and then maybe we'll see where it's coming from. I may just run it without the timing cover for the rest of the season just so I can drive the thing, but we'll see what we can do here. Alright guys, we'll skip ahead about a week now, and we are basically ready to start the car up again. So I had the valve cover off and I left the timing cover off. Could not find where the leak was coming from. So what I did is I replaced the valve cover gasket, put all new RTV sealant on there. I made sure the cam seals were good. Everything looked good. So put everything back together. Now if it does leak again, at least I have the timing cover off. I might have a better idea of where the oil's coming from, but hopefully whatever I did here fixed the problem. So if it was a faulty valve cover gasket, that's been replaced. So I don't know, I think now we're to the point where just fire it up and we'll let it warm up, let the thermostat open up and see if we got any coolant leaks. Transmission leak we won't know until we drive. We'll save that for a little bit later, but for now we'll fire it up and see what happens. Alright guys, we are skipping ahead a few more days again because car drove good, but it is still leaking oil like crazy. So here is the usual oil leak that I was getting before, which travels all the way down the timing cover and drips from there onto the floor. I still have some drippage over here as well. It feels a lot oilier than coolant, so I'm hopeful that it is just the same oil leak as this. It's just leaking so much now that it's traveling along the oil pan and dripping on this side as well. I'm really hoping that's what it is. So when I look under the car here, I can still see a lot of coolant, and I'm hopeful that that is from when I drained the coolant and took that coolant pipe off. I'm hoping it's all still residual because when I run my finger along it, it feels dry. So I'm hoping that's what it's from. There is a little bit of green in the stain on the floor, but again, it is very oily. So I think the green that I'm seeing in there may just be residual. I am so tired of dealing with coolant leaks already. So we can now determine that it is not the valve cover gasket that is leaking. I have replaced it twice and we're still getting leaks from the same spot. Now with the timing cover off, while the car was running, I could see oil dripping from here, which means it's coming from this area. So I'm thinking cam seal. When I turn the car off, it stops. Now replacing a cam seal is going to mean removing the valve cover again, removing the timing belt, removing the cam gears, removing this rear timing cover to gain access to the seals. It's going to be another big job, so I am not looking forward to it. I was going to try replacing this seal because this is the one that's leaking. So I was going to try removing the cam gear only without manipulating the timing belt at all, just trying to slip it off. I may still try that, but I don't think it's going to work because I think there's just too much going on here. The belt's going to skip a tooth or something, and then we're going to have to redo it all anyway. So all this is going to have to come apart. It's not going to be fun. So again, I'm going to be replacing gaskets and seals that I have already replaced. So I'm getting pretty tired of replacing new parts with new parts and still having leaks. So this is about the only thing I can try. I'm going to start tearing this thing apart again. I think I'm going to end the video here, guys, because this has been a pretty long one already, and this has been over the course of about 2 months of dealing with leaks. So I wish we could end this video on a positive, but as you can see, I'm already starting to wear my winter gear because it is starting to cool off out there. So I may not even get a chance to drive this car this year officially. So that's kind of a bummer, but I guess the positive we can take out of it is we have all winter to work on this thing now. There's no real deadline. We can take our time, get stuff done right. If I do have to tear the whole thing apart, remove the engine, whatever the case is, we have the time for it now. Winter lasts about 6 months for us here, sometimes longer. So guess we're just gonna start tearing into it. Maybe we get lucky and we can drive it this year. But anyway, if you guys like the video, give me a thumbs up. Send me some good thoughts, guys, because this is starting to get frustrating already. I'm really starting to lose interest in this car. As much as I love it and the hours I put into it, I'm getting tired of it. So definitely send me some good thoughts. Drop a comment below. Maybe send some positivity my way, because I don't know. I just really don't feel like working on this thing anymore. But yeah, guys, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do so. We do have another winter project coming up that I'm actually really excited about. Hopefully we can get some footage on that soon, but yeah, we'll see you guys next time.